I was awakened from what seemed like a very deep, dark sleep. So I woke up being just flying through the air, but I was flying through this perfect, velvety blackness. I am speaking just as I am now. And I said, "You're dying." He said, "Actually, you're not dying, you're dead." And I cracked myself up and I laughed out loud. And I thought, wow. And I was greatly comforted to know that everything I am had gone with me.
I was already feeling oneness, and I was just flying around as a beam of light with other beams of light. And we were all doing our own thing, but we were all connected. We were all one at the same time. And then I saw this big planet in the distance, and I remember pointing, saying, "Home, home."
There was so much light emanating from his face that I couldn't see what he looked like. But he spoke to me also, and he said, "You must tell them there is no death." In the second that he said that, boom, I woke back up inside the hospital room.
Christmas on Earth, it's always the worst day in hell. And I'm thinking, I'm not getting out of here. And I thought, I don't belong here. So I started singing a Christmas carol. And she shrieked and she jumped at me. I just closed my eyes, the lights go up, I'm someplace else.
I wasn't heading towards a light. I was in blackness, but I became these ripples, and the ripples were me.
What if consciousness isn't something we make, but something that meets us when everything else falls away? 5 ordinary lives hit an impossible edge, and what opened on the other side asks us to rethink what a self is and where it lives. Welcome back to Beyond 80%. This is part 1 of 2 experiencer episodes. You'll hear from Ash Perrow, a teacher, musician, and surfer whose routine back surgery unraveled. John J. Davis, expecting a quick procedure that brought him into a new realm. Christina Duffy, who was only 8 years old on a lakeshore that forever changed her life. Kathy McDaniel, placed in a coma to save her life. And Rosemary Thornton, a widowed author whose minor procedure turned into a major heartbeat. They describe awareness continuing when the body stops. Clearer senses, unconditional love, life reviews, even realms that mirror the mind. Not proof, but perspectives that raise honest questions. If your consciousness can step outside of your body, who are you really? If love feels like the baseline over there, what should matter most here? And if your choices are felt by others in a life review, how do you want to live now? Across this episode, we'll trace 4 arcs: the threshold, how the crossing begins; the realms beyond, what opens on the other side of fear, what's asked of us there, and the message, practical ways to live differently because of it. Life is ordinary until it isn't. A routine day, an ordinary choice, and then everything stops. No one plans to die today. Yet for a few, today becomes the doorway. No warning, no preparation, just the moment when life breaks open. Ash Perrow, a teacher and musician on Australia's Gold Coast, went in for a routine back surgery in 2015. A torn vein went unnoticed. He bled internally for 16 hours.
During the night, I was in a lot of pain. So this young physio comes in and he says, it's time to get up for rehab. I sit on the edge of the bed and I look down at my thigh, and my thigh was at least double the size it normally was. I had lost so much blood that my lower body was swollen. Yeah, and something's not right. And then I stand up and then I sit back down on the bed and then I collapse. The Code Blue team come in. They're trying to attach the ECG monitors on me. There's already a face mask on me with the oxygen mask. I could feel my body. I was just in this cold sweat. And the physio's over in the corner. The nurse that's been taking care of me is at the foot of the bed. And eventually the surgeon comes in as well, and he's there. And I can hear everything the medical team's saying. It's like I'm in this state of hyper-awareness as this is all happening. And I keep thinking, I'll be okay. I'll be okay. And I hear them saying he doesn't have a pulse. I hear one of the nurses say his blood pressure's 52 on 36. And that's when I thought, oh, this is serious. He's not breathing. I'm surprised at that as that's happening, because I'm, oh, okay.
He could sense the urgency around his body, yet felt calm. Something had already shifted.
It's getting very hard to keep my eyes open. I'm trying. I'm really trying. And then I think, oh, I'm dying. This is dying. I'm dying right now. And that was followed by immediate, just deep sadness because there's no one I love in the room with me. And I thought, oh, I'm dying and no one I love is here. It was heartbreaking. It was a full body sadness that happened before I blacked out. There's many curious things that happened, but instead of just a normal fainting, not aware of anything, I went to black. I wasn't heading towards a light. I was in blackness. If someone's meditated and they've experienced that black stillness, that's what I went into. But I became these ripples. Like if you drop a pebble in a pond and the ripples go out, I was the ripples and the ripples were me.
John Davis was 21, headed into a routine surgery, an operation that should have been low risk. An allergic reaction to anesthesia stopped his heart for 7 minutes.
As soon as they injected it all into my arm, everything just went black. And then the very next second, I opened up my eyes and I was standing in the most beautiful building I have ever seen. And it was so long, so far down, I couldn't see the end of it. I didn't even know that I died. During this whole thing that was unfolding for me, I didn't know until it was over. When I was over there, I have never felt anything that was more real than that. When we think of our lives here, we go about our day, everything seems real. We think this is what real reality is, but it's actually not. This is only a small part of reality. When I was over there, that was home, something more. And that was more real than anything I've ever felt here on Earth. It was the most extraordinary feeling of peace and absolute joy that I have never known.
It wasn't sleep. It was a step through. From surgery lights to full awareness in a world that felt unmistakably more real. For John, what should have been a quick procedure became a crossing. He opened his eyes not in recovery, but in a vast marble atrium. Light underfoot, columns lifting into brightness, and a guide named Alan waiting as if he'd been expected.
I hear, "My name is Alan. I'm your spirit guide." And he starts to tell me every single thing that I'm seeing. And I think that is the gift that they gave me, to remember everything so clearly.
Behind the white marble, there were columns stretching endlessly, tables with counselors seated 2 by 2, greeting new arrivals with quiet recognition.
They skipped the tunnel, and I ended up on the other side of the white light. What's on the other side of that white light at the end of the tunnel is the orientation center. And my guide said, these are orientation counselors. What the orientation counselors do is they help people remember where they're from.
Christina Duffy was 8, spending the day at the lake with her parents when 2 men abducted her and tried to drown her.
He had me under the water with my head facing up, and I saw the sun shining through the water, and he had his hands around my neck. And just instantaneously like that, I felt just peace and love, serenity, tranquility, like all the feelings you can imagine if you needed to relax. And then I was in a white tunnel of light, and I was on my back, and I was moving along in the tunnel of light. And it was a long tunnel, and I remember thinking that it was really strange that I didn't care about anybody that I left behind. So at that point, I already knew that I was dying, which I thought was interesting.
Terror peaked, and then the body fell away. In a calm, white tunnel, an 8-year-old knew she was safe before she had the words for why. Kathy McDaniel, who was 52, developed a respiratory illness. Doctors induced a coma to save her life. Her family was told she had a 38% chance of survival.
They said, we're going to pretty much take your brain offline. We're just going to put you in a deep coma, and maybe you'll wake up and maybe you won't. I'm going to make it or I won't. There was really no choice, and it was rather quickly done. So I said goodbye to the folks, and off I went.
Not every crossing is gentle. Kathy's wasn't. First, there was nothing, just a blank void. Then the darkness turned to red. The air felt hot, and a burnt smell filled the air. Kathy realized she woke up in a dark place, a place where nightmares begin.
And it was pitch dark, no sound. I couldn't tell if I was standing or sitting. There was like this swirling red fog, and it started getting too warm, and something really smelled bad, and I could hear people shrieking and moaning. I thought, where am I? Then all of a sudden, out of this fog came this horrible voice that said, do you know where you are? My mind was racing, and my little Catholic brain said, hell?
Rosemary Thornton, a widowed author, had a medical crisis during what was supposed to be a minor procedure. She bled out and lost her heartbeat for more than 10 minutes. Her crossing opened to a vast and silent void.
One of the things that happened was I had a memory, a very distinct memory, that I had been in this blackness, this black velvety void. And that's what that was for me, was perfect peace. And I feel the presence of a companion spirit or an angel with me. And as I am moving through this experience, I also thought with an NDE, I might get open fields and sunflowers and meadows and little birds singing. And I got this void.
For Ash, it was just ripples in blackness. For John, a hall of light. For Christina, a tunnel that erased fear. For Kathy, a nightmare that mocked certainty. For Rosemary, the quiet before creation. Each story begins the same way, with the end of a heartbeat and the realization that something continues. What comes after the crossing feels less like ending than arrival. Places that seem designed for the soul, schools of light, gardens of reunion, cosmic expansions, and for some, darker provinces shaped by fear. On the other side, John found what he calls the Orientation Center, an infinite temple of stone and light.
My guide said, this is the Orientation Center. You passed from a heart attack, and now you're back home again. And I was standing in the most beautiful building I have ever seen. It was made of white, polished marble. And it was so long, so far down, I couldn't see the end of it. So the next place he takes me to was this gigantic, huge, rectangular building. It's all made of white marble columns all along the sides. Then he takes me to the inside of this building, and we go to one of these rooms. And the first room he takes me to is a round room, just a perfect circle. And above me were these video screens, like what we would think of as a movie screen in a theater. There must have been 15 or 20 of these all around me in a circle. And my guide said, this is the life review. And part of the life review is that it helps you to see, did you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish in your life? But there's another component to the life review that is the greatest teacher for the soul. Because we're all here to learn. What happens when a person finishes their lifetime is their guide and that soul evaluate their life. And it's the life review process that teaches the soul that if you hurt somebody, you have to feel what your actions made them feel. I could watch my entire life. Every episode of my life was on these different screens, and I could see going to kindergarten, playing soccer, going on vacation with my parents. All these things were playing. And it was like watching a memory. It was just amazing.
The life review isn't a courtroom. It's a classroom. You're not condemned. You're shown. Emotion is the lesson plan. Every moment comes back so you can feel what it gave and what it took. Your choices replay, not to shame you, but to let you inhabit everyone they touched. It's empathy at full volume. At the end of the tunnel, Christina met a presence she calls her father, not her earthly dad, but a vast, loving mind that filled the opening like a face of light.
And then there was a face at the end of the tunnel, and the face was huge. It was a man's face, and the face was so big, covering the end of the tunnel. And I call him my father. Another word would be God. And so I felt like I was protected, safe, and loved.
There was no sermon, only a clear knowing. It wasn't her time. And yet, like kids do, she bargained. A moment of grace opened. She slipped past the threshold to have a look around.
I flew through and I was a beam of light, and I was just flying around with other beams of light. While I was flying around, which looked like outer space, I remember thinking, it's strange that I don't care about these other beams of light that I was flying with. It just felt like they were all part of me anyway. So it was like being around family. And then I remember seeing this big, big beam of light. It was like I could only see the perimeter of it, and it looked like the sun. And I remember thinking, this is where we all came from. And so I was already feeling oneness. And we were all doing our own thing, but we were all connected. We were all one at the same time. And then I saw this big planet in the distance, and I remember pointing, saying, home, home. As soon as I woke up, I wanted to die. I did not want to come back. Because to me, Earth was hell, and the afterlife was heaven.
What struck her wasn't death. It was the ease. No fear, no body, just belonging. Everything felt familiar, as if she'd stepped back into a place she'd always known. After a medical crisis, Rosemary's Crossing didn't open into scenery at all. It was the opposite, pure awareness in a vast, quiet space. No body, no edges. And yet she wasn't afraid. The stillness felt safe, like being held.
I heard somebody screaming, and I mean screeching, Rosemary, Rosemary. But for me, it got softer and softer and softer because I wasn't Rosemary, because we have already detached from our earthly persona. And persona is just Latin for the word mask. And when I died, that went away. Rosemary went away. I had no fear, no regret, no sorrow, no sadness. It was just gone. It wasn't like the struggle that is on earth to let go of that personality. And I cannot tell you what a comfort that was, that everything I really am came with me. And I remember so clearly thinking, what did I leave on that gurney? And I thought, anxiety, fear, self-recrimination, guilt, regret, sadness, despair, the whole mess was what got left behind. And I'm still floating in perfect blackness, velvety, peaceful blackness. And I felt the presence of a very large being whom I consider a feminine presence, much taller than me, to my left and slightly behind me. And I'm still in this blackness, can't see a thing, but I had a very distinct memory that I had been in this gentle blackness before. I just remember thinking, wow, there really is a lot of love in the world, a lot of love in people's hearts, a lot of goodness and love in this place. The peace that you can't describe to somebody. Perfect, perfect peace.
For Rosemary, the void was a reset, less a place than a peace. Nothing to look at, everything to feel. A gentle, feminine presence taught without words. You're safe. You can let go. Only after she surrendered did form return. Light gathered the way morning gathers, soft at first, then everywhere, until the love she sensed became the place she was in. In some crossings, that's the first realm, not location, but orientation, where identity loosens and the soul remembers itself. Kathy's afterworld opened in reverse. She went from fear toward light. She'd been a devout Catholic, shaped by images of purgatory and penance.
In Catholic school, I bought the whole thing about heaven and hell and purgatory. They were big on purgatory. We were told that was just like hell, except you will get out. They figured that if you did a certain sin, you would have to pay a certain amount of time in purgatory. And people either had to pray for you or you had to prepay with indulgences. So I was always very careful to add to my bank account. Very fearful of purgatory. I think most Catholics are afraid to die because there's supposedly going to be this judgment. You're going to have to serve your time and then go to heaven.
The next thing she knew was nothing. No up, no down. Then the scene thickened and started answering her panic.
And I didn't know how the heck I got here. But I was scared. I knew that this creature was out there and I did not want to go there. So I just kept running, but I had no sensation that I did not have a body. All of a sudden, all these bright lights came up. And now I'm in this scene that is a bombed out city. There are people running around screaming. There's fires. There's buildings have fallen over. There's rebar cut sticking out of concrete. Dark people. I was just totally freaked out. The first real entity I talked to that was not human was this big demon thing. And he just said, "Do you want to get out of here?" And I thought, wow, speaks perfect English. I thought, I'll play along. I don't know what the heck I am, but I'm going to have to play along. So he wanted me to do him a favor. And then anytime I would refuse to do something or go against their wishes in this hellish place, the lights would come down and the lights would come up, and I'd find myself in another place. So there was a lot of bad experiences.
It wasn't punishment. It was a mirror. The place responded to whatever she brought to it. Fear built more fear. Set pieces drawn from her own dread. Fighting didn't work. Hiding didn't work. She needed a different signal. So she reached for the cleanest thing she could remember, a song, and started to sing.
So I started singing a Christmas carol. So I'm singing away in a manger, and she's telling me to shut up. And I come to the little Lord, and she shrieked and she jumped at me. I just closed my eyes, not heck with it. I'm going to go someplace else anyway, because that's what happens. The lights go up. I'm someplace else. So anyway, this time it's just like whoosh, bright light everywhere. I'm tumbling like in this sparkly white stuff, and I'm just absolutely full of joy and bliss and love, and everything else is forgotten. Nothing ever existed. And I am so happy. I want to stay here forever.
The physics flipped. Heat fell away. The red washed to white. And the takeaway was simple. Change the frequency, change the realm. For Kathy, love, however small, was the way out. Across these stories, the landscapes differ in form, but rhyme in meaning. Some wake in schools of light, some in the quiet of the void, some in nightmares of their own making. Each realm seems tailored to consciousness, to what must be learned, released, or remembered before moving on. For John, the lesson was knowledge and service. For Christina, oneness and belonging. For Rosemary, trust. For Kathy, the end of fear. Each soul learned in the language it could understand. And for Ash, the language was a vow. In the black stillness, he chose one sentence, and it pulled him back.
I was just in the blackness as the ripples with conscious awareness. And I was so surprised. Wow, this is dying. I can still think. And the thing that was even more surprising was I felt like myself. There was like the essence of who I am, which I knew intimately already. And I was that in my life on earth. But there were aspects of me that I was denying. So like conditioning, right? So the longer I was in this state of ripples and going out, the more conditioning was being left behind. That conditioning was staying with the body, and I was coming out into my soul's fingerprint. We all have this particular fingerprint that is our soul, and that no one else is like it. And we are conscious awareness. There's nothing else like me or like you or the person listening. There's nothing like you in the universe. Right, so this is unique to you. It's extraordinary. That's what we are. That's what I experienced. And I experienced being my unique self without the conditioning. I'm still dying. The ripples are still going out and out and out. And we're way past any galaxy. We have just gone. And I felt this change come over me, and it was like this golden kind of warmth. And I said, it just came out of nowhere. I want to stay for the work that I do and walk the planet from my heart. And instantly I had a download of what that looked like, straight back into my body, opened my eyes. We've got a pulse. His eyes are open. He's breathing. Level 11 pain. I'm moaning and screaming, but I'm also thinking, I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm back. I'm alive. I'm back.
Ash returned to his body in pain with a long road to recovery and loss. But one thing was clear. Love is what sent him back, and it would be his compass from here on.
My head is the tool for doing what my heart says we're going to do. My head isn't the decision maker. It's the tool for doing the work. The heart is the guide. I have to listen to my heart, not my head. Now that's all come from guidance. This is your work. And I have a contract, which is to stay for the work that I do and walk the planet from my heart. That is a non-negotiable contract in my life. I was gifted a second life because of that agreement that I made.
Since then, Ash's work has taken new shape, guided by the same vow that brought him back.
So these days, my work takes two forms, and they're both very connected. One is, if we come back to the ripples, it's about helping heart-centered people do their ripples. And so it's supporting people to do that, because I know what that's like. I know how challenging it can be, and I know, for me, how many challenges I've had to navigate and learn about myself and my conditioning and trusting guidance and processing emotions and relationships and all that. And the other is with their visibility, so their messaging and how they communicate their work to the world.
For Rosemary, the other side spoke softly, stillness, presence, and a quiet promise. In life, Rosemary had been worn thin by decisions. Years of caretaking, widowhood, and medical crises had left her tired of choosing every path, seeming to demand another sacrifice after her husband's death. So when the stillness came, it felt like mercy. For the first time, there was nothing to fix, nothing to manage, no next step to choose, just presence. And in that peace, she sensed a truth forming, that maybe choice itself wasn't a test, but a gift she could finally lay down.
One of the things that happened was I had a very distinct memory that I had been in this blackness, this gentle blackness before. And I feel the presence of a companion spirit or an angel with me. And so I said to one of them, I've been here before in this blackness floating. The answer was immediate. Remember, your mother told you you were given up for dead as an infant, and yet you had a healing and were restored to life. They had given me up medically for dead. And the angel said, you died as that little infant in the hospital. And they said, that's why this feels so familiar. And that's why you've always felt so different from the rest of the world. And that's why you hear and see things that other people don't traditionally hear and see. So I was like, you know what? That would have been good to know 58 years ago, but whatever, on we go. Because I had zero interest in ever returning to that. I was like, this is so great. This is so cool. I've only heard of one person who had a near-death experience that said, I'll go back. Every story I've heard, people are like, do not send me back to that circular insane asylum. They couldn't have dragged me back. Well, they could do anything. They could drag me back by the scruff of my neck. We've learned that lesson. So I'm in this white room and I see a door in front of me, and having read all these NDEs, I'm like, I know what that door is. That door is the final crossover. Once you make it through that door, there is no coming back. And I remember thinking, everybody out of my way, I'm doing the door. And prior to this, I had had 3 prayers that I prayed every day, and I was very sincere, but one was, God, heal me or let me go. 2 was, when I die, and I know it won't be long, no life review. I had seen myself as a hot mess, as an embarrassment to everybody, all this floundering and crying and carrying on and losing my mind over my husband. And 3, no more hard decisions. I had faced so many hard decisions. I didn't want any more hard decisions in my life. I had severe decision fatigue. And I see the door, and I put up my right hand to push through the door. And as I did, I paused, and I said, is this the divine will for my life? And that was the precise question. And before I could get past divine, the answer was no. But whatever you decide, you go with all of God's blessings and mercy and grace and care and love. There isn't a wrong decision. And I thought that was a beautiful answer to that prayer, no more hard decisions. As I'm deciding, yes, I want to go, I'm shown a vision of that nurse who had shown me such motherly care. And in this vision, it was like I was a silent observer watching a piece of her life. She was sitting in a medical supply room surrounded by all the linens and accoutrements of medical care, sitting on a little hard stainless steel stool, leaning forward, head in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. And I'm watching this, and she says, I promised that woman I wasn't going to let her die, and I lost her. And I'm like, come on. Way to get a empath. Really? So I thought to myself, okay, she's my age. She's lost patience. She'll get over this. But then I wasn't just observing her. I felt her feelings. And I realized she was in emotional agony and guilt from having lost me. And I thought, oh man, if I can spare one person as much grief and agony and sadness as I had felt, because I was very familiar with grief and agony from my husband's thing, I thought, I guess I got to go back. And in the blink of an eye, except much faster, I was back on that gurney in the hospital. And one of the things I was told in this room was that if I decided to go back, I would be restored to wholeness. And it wasn't said the mental health things will be resolved or the cancer diagnosis will go away, but that I would be restored to wholeness. And I was kind of like, yeah, good to know. I'm doing the door. Thanks for the insight. I'm out of here. I was surrounded by people who really understood me. And what they said to me, what they said was, that was a hard one, but look at you. You did great. And you're home. You're home. And if I had to sum this up in 3 words, it would actually be relatively easy, but it would be, welcome home, dearie.
Different valleys of shadow. Kathy's terror made visible. Ash's identity stripped to awareness. Rosemary's trust inside stillness. And a promise to be healed if she returned. Beyond the dark, they found the same truth. Suffering wasn't a sentence. It was a teacher. When the darkness lifted, what remained was instruction. Pain as a guide, suffering as a lesson. Even the worst of it arranged itself into meaning and pointed them. Every story that passes through death returns carrying something. Not proof, but perspective. The images differ. The messages converge. Led by his guide, John was shown the lay of the afterlife. He paused in a garden of welcome, a place of reunion where souls greet their own. The message was simple. Earth takes courage, and coming home is celebrated.
And my guide said, everybody has a reunion when they get back. All the people that you ever knew in your life that passed before you are all there waiting for you. And the other thing that was really cool is all of our animals are there. All the animals that you loved, they're all there. My guide said, it's a really big deal to come to Earth because this planet is so hard. You have to be a fighter and a warrior for all the things that we go through because there are many, many souls who don't want to come here. So when we get back, when we've finished our life, it's a really big deal. Why would any of us leave there to come to a place like this? And the reason is because we all like to learn new things. On the other side, there is no conflict. There's nothing to work through. There's no hardship. There's no trauma. When you come to Earth, this is where you have experiential learning. Everybody has their own ideas of what they want to accomplish in lifetimes. That was hard for me to accept because I was never raised that way. But it makes perfect sense now that I understand that we have all been around for eons.
From there, his guide led him into a field, a meadow of light that seemed to breathe with life itself.
So my guide takes me to a meadow, and to this day, I have never seen a meadow as beautiful as this one. Rolling hills, the greenest grass, wildflowers. It was a perfect day, and he leaves. He disappears, and I'm standing there by myself. So I turn around to look at the rest of the meadow, and as I turn around, there's a gentleman right in front of me. He had a white robe on, and he had a golden sash around his waist, and he had gold-colored sandals that laced up his calves. And he didn't tell me his name, but I knew this was the entity that we know as Jesus. I could not see his face. There was so much light that was emanating from his face that I couldn't see what he looked like. But he spoke to me also, and he said, you must tell them there is no death.
It wasn't a suggestion. It was a commission. The words carried both authority and love, and when they struck him, the vision vanished.
In the second that he said that, boom, I woke back up inside the hospital room.
The gardens, the light, the command, each part left its mark. John's return wasn't gentle, but it was purposeful. His task was simple, though never easy, to live in a world of endings while remembering the one truth he was shown, that life doesn't end at all. Kathy emerged from the lower realms into brilliance, carrying simple rules for Earth.
Be loving and kind, merciful and forgiving, encouraging, grateful, non-judgmental, and useful. Those are seared in here. So that's how I've been trying to live my life ever since. And it's just changed everything.
Ash returned with a contract, a vow between worlds.
I have a contract, which is to stay for the work that I do and walk the planet from my heart. That is a non-negotiable contract in my life, which has changed everything. That means that my life is not so much mine anymore. That was the agreement.
Love is not just emotion, it's an operating system. And Christina brought back a 4-line recipe.
Love, be loved. Experience life, just be. Life is our playground, but we don't want to play on the playground by ourselves. We need to have other people in our experiences.
Different words, same frequency, all pointing home. John was told to share that there is no death. Rosemary was shown that love never ends. Kathy was reminded that kindness is the highest law. Ash was tasked to walk the planet from his heart. Christina was given a simple way to live. Maybe the point of dying isn't to learn what comes next, but to remember what's been true all along. Consciousness continues. Love is who we are, and the only thing that really dies is fear. In part 2, we follow what happens after the light, when those who've glimpsed eternity wake up in a hospital bed and the harder journey begins, learning how to live again. I'm your host, Ryan Olexson, and this is Beyond 80%.